Okay, so I'm going to jump straight into it because I hate when intros last way too long on these YouTube videos. So today's video, we are doing the Night Parrot. So I have this sticker of this little guy, and obviously it's a parrot. So we're going to do a bird today. So I wanted to just go through some facts, but before I do that, I'm just going to get out all the supplies for the page because I don't want to get stuck talking and reading when I should be sticking stuff down. Okay, so got all these bits and bobs. I'm just going to jump into decorating and I'm going to tell you some stuff about this very unique parrot. Pezoporus occidentalis. This little guy was first discovered in 1845. It's one of the most elusive birds in the world. Now, it is Australian because I love doing Australian animals on here, but I do also plan to do other animals. So I'm just going to point out that, yes, it is an Australian bird, but worldwide it is fairly well known. I'll go into a little bit more on that later. But basically, they were first discovered in 1845 and then they were thought to be extinct between 1912 and 1979. They found a bunch of specimens, so 2 dead specimens were found in 1997 and 2006. A live bird was then rediscovered, photographed and videoed in 2013. So it's very unique and it's actually been rediscovered. So basically that just means that it was thought gone, extinct. They couldn't be saved. There weren't any left. They had the last wild caught specimen. But they discovered them and it was sort of over a weird period of time. So it was in the 90s and then in the 2000s. But since then, there have been several sanctuaries and areas set up for these birds. So it's been identified that there is a need to protect these birds, obviously, but to set up an area and be able to learn and survey them and record sound, all that sort of thing. So when a lot of this happened between 1997, 2006, and then 2013, the world was so intensely curious about this species that the only known population is kept top secret. So I believe there's more than one known population, but all I could find was that there's this one specific one in this specific area, but I will go into that a little bit later. Fortunately or unfortunately thing, because people are people. And when you find out that there's this extremely elusive, endangered bird that's in this ecosystem, basically in the middle of nowhere, in the desert, out in the middle of Australia, it's very hard to keep people away. So this is one of the reasons why they've kept this top secret. It's in a 56,000 a hectare Pullum Reserve. So this is a reserve in, I believe this one is Queensland. There's two areas that I know of, one in WA, one in Queensland. And I believe Pullum Reserve is in Queensland, in Western Queensland. And there are 10 to 20 individual birds, which I think these records are a little bit old. There might be more now because I did see some mentions of 20 to 30 individuals and more even. So I'm not sure what those numbers are, but I will double check and probably put it on the screen. And here there is a question of learning from our mistakes and to take better care of future of endangered species. On the other hand, if we don't respect nature and how wild some animals are, then they don't have that chance of surviving. So some species, like the night parrot, fill a particular niche, which in general, a lot of species do fill a particular niche, and that just means that they have specialized feeding or specialized habitat or a special kind of grass that they hide out in during the day to come out at night, hence nocturnal night parrot. I should let you know, I'm just trying to give you an introduction, but I have glued down a bunch of moons because this bird is nocturnal. So they're active at night. And I just thought it'd be nice to do a moonlight kind of spread because that's when they would be most active. So basically, they hide in this clump of grass during the day, which is called spinifex, all over Australia, widespread in these red deserts in the outback. And they hide in that during the day, and then they come out at night to forage for seed. So they're a parrot, they're just a seed eater, they eat seed, sometimes fruit and flowers, that sort of thing. But they are a ground parrot, so they are mostly on the ground, and they are nocturnal, so they come out at night to feed. Bit of a unique situation. Most parrots don't do that. They're active during the day. So actually probably like 99% of parrots are active during the day. So I just thought I'd mention that because I've glued down the moons, but I am going to go into more of that later. So let's go back to this learning from our mistakes. So this is why a lot of work has gone into the conservation of these species. There's been obviously a history of endangered animals going extinct over the years, over European settlement, but also in recent years. Like there's just a number of things that contribute to extinction. And the fact that the night parrot effectively came back from extinction is very interesting because not many animals live to survive again. And by that, I just mean that we thought they disappeared for a while, but obviously they didn't. So it just means that they were thought extinct and we have a second chance because we realized they weren't extinct. So now here they are. So basically a bunch of scientists, ecologists, land management scientists, volunteers, a whole bunch of people have gotten together and made this reserve, which is called Pullum Wildlife Reserve. So because they fill this particular niche, these parrots, they're nocturnal and they're seed eaters. They probably eat specific seeds that are related to plants, and then they encourage seed dispersal, making those plants grow. So human intervention really could be a disaster for them. So people who don't know the parrot, like the general public who go along and try to find this bird because it's so elusive and, even just bird watchers, no one intending to do harm. I mean, there might be someone, but in general terms, we're speaking of people who are interested in wildlife. And they might disrupt the habitat or something goes wrong and the parrot is never seen again because for a number of reasons. It could just be that you scared them off, or you trampled on their nest or something, or, it's really hard when you start to get people involved in wildlife, in conservation and in protecting wildlife, especially species that are very, as I've said a million times, elusive, but also very shy, quiet, and temperamental, because it's been up and down throughout history that we've even known they existed. So obviously, yeah, they're very hard to find, and being nocturnal, they're even harder to find, because obviously it's a lot harder to look for animals at night than it is during the day. So for all kinds of reasons, I think it's best to leave this kind of thing to the experts. And yeah, we have all the scientists doing that, working on it. So I think the fact that they've kept it top secret is not so much a bad thing. Okay, so another thing about these guys is they have a really great adaptation. I just wanted to mention very briefly, because we're still on the introduction. Camouflage. So this picture doesn't really do it justice at all, but these guys are absolute masters of disguise. Those are they're a different color on here, but this Spinifex is probably more like this color. Gonna focus this color here. They have this coloring. It blends in really well with the grasses, but also the desert. It sort of blurs their outline because of the dark specks. And a lot of birds actually have this adaptation. Very similar colorings with green, yellow, and black. I think it depends a lot on the vegetation. These guys are a bit more yellowy green because of the spinifex they live in. So it's very similar to, say, a badgergar, which is a parakeet, I think some people call it in other countries, but they're actually native to Australia. They're in a very similar environment to the night parrot. Okay, so their diet is just lots of different grass seeds. So primarily spinifex. This is where they nest and hide in during the day, and they're in spinifex rich environments in general. So that's pretty much that with their diet. It's not too complicated. They just like their seed. I have already mentioned they are extremely shy and quiet. And this is probably another reason why they're nocturnal, because there is a lot going on at night, because deserts are actually surprisingly very lively and active at night. A lot of the animals are nocturnal because obviously in deserts it's very hot during the day, so a lot of animals come out at night when there's a reprieve from the weather, so that works out better for them and these guys too. And yeah, they scare very easily, obviously, in human contact. So some very new information has actually come into light about their feeding and water intake, their behavior around water. So it was thought that they didn't drink much water. Any water that they did get was from succulents or, cactus, that sort of thing. Not that there's many in Australia, but it was assumed that they're getting some sort of water resource from some sort of vegetation out in the desert, because they had never been observed drinking. However, in November 2025, just a few months ago when I'm recording this video, a night parrot was seen on camera drinking from a watering hole in the Pilbara in Western Australia. So this is very interesting because obviously we weren't sure about where they got their water from, intake from. So drinking from the waterhole gives new evidence to the contrary. This helps to model maps where the birds might actually be found. These stickers are very good for someone like me to redo if I stuff it up. Here we go. It's a different shape sticker than what I'm used to. Okay, I'll put one right there. And I think a circle as well, because we're getting into our night time. Okay. So they are classed as critically endangered. And as I just said, they've recently been filmed on this nocturnal camera trap, which means it's not actually a trap. A lot of people think camera trap. Oh no, it's an actual trap, but no, it's just a camera. And that's how we trap images of animals, I guess. So that 56,000 hectare area, and this has been recorded habitat. So they've recorded a lot of sound and, you know, seen feathers and different activity that's sort of proof of, I guess it is proof. There's no, I think they have found specimens over the years, but they've found more, you know, tracks and feathers and feeding behavior and a lot of sound recordings. Actually, I think it was something like 100,000 hours of night parrot sound recorded in this reserve, but also in other areas. I think there might be 2 or 3 spots where they're pretty sure of the population, and it was really hard to get specific numbers because they all seem to say slightly different things, but in the overall research, it's it's this particular, this Pulum Reserve, which is 56,000 hectares, which is a big area, is, you know, this specific area where they've found them. So in this particular area, I'm pretty sure this one's in Queensland, the west of Queensland. Temperatures reached mid 40 degrees Celsius or 113 Fahrenheit. So volunteers and workers work hard. It is obviously boiling hot there, and workers need to stay in on-site housing for reprieve throughout the year, because obviously they're doing a lot of paperwork, they're doing a lot of tracking and filming, and yeah, it's really hard to do that on these extremely hot days. So they've recently had some funding to build accommodation and stuff. So this particular land too was also on a pastoral lease, so meaning it was for grazing cattle or sheep, or that was what the lease was for that particular land or part of that land. And so they were the only things that were allowed, and there would have been water restrictions and all kinds of things, but now it has been changed to a sanctuary by the Queensland government and taken over by Bush Heritage, which is the organisation that is looking after all the conservation and the scientists and the housing, and they're a great organisation. They're a conservation organisation, and they have a good website. I'll link it down below. All the information's there. So let me continue with this and stop talking and stop not working while I'm talking. So the this sanctuary has been, you know, fairly newly made a sanctuary to do research and that sort of thing with these birds and track known populations. So it's a big part of that is the protecting species, not just the night parrot, but many other species from feral animals. So like foxes and rabbits and pigs and camels, and there is surprisingly a lot of feral animals in Australia, things you wouldn't expect either. So it's unreal, really. So feral animals, grazing animals, and wildfire seem to be the biggest threats. So protecting an area from those three things is a mammoth task because obviously it's 56,000 hectares. So that I can't even put into words. Like, I can't even imagine really how big that is because fire management for an area like that, if a fire broke out, I mean, it's very, look, Australian vegetation is meant to burn. It's very difficult to say otherwise because that's literally what a lot of it is made for, to burn. There used to be, back in like before settlement days and that, there used to be fires galore, and a lot of the plants here in Australia thrive on um, thrive on fire, because a lot of seeds and seed pods and grasses and things, they come back in, they are regenerated in fire. So it's very interesting actually, getting into fire. I might actually do a whole video on that. But it is a part of nature, it's a circle of life. So it's very difficult when we say fire management because on one hand it's going to wipe out species and animals and that part of life, but on the other hand we've got this highly endangered night parrot that we don't want to kill with fire. So obviously it has to be managed, but also it's really difficult because it's natural for fire to be in these areas, and these birds would have adapted to having fire around them throughout their lifetime, and they would, they would have a chance of escaping because they just have that built in them. But anyway, there is a lot of work being done to plan this conservation and general fire training, fire, what do we call it? Just fire management, I guess. So keeping like long grasses down and keeping them cut back so it's harder for it to spread. And it's a sandy desert. It's not so much going to be just on fire 24/7, but it does entail the that there be fires every now and then, and the bush vegetation is going to burn very well because it is on Australian soil. So yeah, I just wanted to make a note of that because it's just very interesting when you talk about all these different factors that can make it this species so elusive. I'd also like to quickly mention a little note on mining. So we're talking more in the Pilbara here in Western Australia, but I'm pretty sure there's mines in Western Queensland as well. But I'm not sure how they directly interfere, or if they do directly interfere with the night parrot. But in might be a little bit too much going on with this page. So let's add more to it. So what was I saying? Yes, mining. So in WA, there are a lot of mines going up, and it's creating a lot of jobs, which is great. It's great for our country. It's great for people who need the earth minerals. Worldwide, world countries would love the minerals here. Found here in Australia, we have a lot of rare earth minerals that not many other countries have but need for things like infrastructure and technology and that sort of thing. And it's good. It creates jobs. It creates business. A lot of people are happy, except the environmentalists. So it's a tough one. Yeah, I sigh because look, I understand the idea of mining and why we do it, but it also does affect our native wildlife. Yeah, just a big sigh there. But there is hope. So, a copper gold mine has been proposed 60 kilometres from where the footage was taken in WA of this bird at the watering hole. Mining companies are legally obligated to carry out environmental surveys and monitoring. So, they have, I'm not sure of the details, but they have they can't build a mine unless they carry out environmental research. And you hear people joking about it all the time, but they might find a, orchid or a flower or something, and they can't build anything there because this flower exists in this one area. Well, the night parrot is a perfect example of that, and that is exactly what is going on. This animal only lives in particular areas, and we have to protect it because that's the only habitat. There's a lot that comes into it. It sounds ridiculous to stop everything for a single animal. It's not really a single animal. It's a species, a group of animals. But I think in some cases it's fine. In Australia in particular, we have a huge land mass, and the people to land is very tiny, the ratio, and people don't need a lot of space. Let's just say it like that. It gets very complicated. I'm not going to try to make it less complicated because that's the truth. It's just there are so many ethics and different things involved in that. But when people come into the country, and especially these wild habitats, which is this area would be quite remote where these parrots are found. So to come and build a mine, obviously it's fine to extract whatever you need from the earth, but it has to be done in a way that as many parties as possible are happy. So there's a bit of compromise. And I think having companies legally obligated to carry out these environmental surveys is only a good thing at this stage, because otherwise they wouldn't, and they would just bulldoze whatever. But if we have that sort of as a prerequisite, then it has to go through, and they have to take note, and they have to do proper scientific research. And yeah, it just makes sense. So you have the environmentalists and the workers and companies, and it's a privilege to have so many opportunities within this Australian land mass. Like, we have our conservationists looking after this bird, but then we have these rare earth minerals that we can extract and sell overseas, that sort of thing, or make our own stuff. But I think compromising and making everyone happy, fostering both extremes, it just requires forward planning and cooperation. So if we know that this bird is in this particular spot where there's water, then we move to another spot. And that is exactly what some of the mining companies have done. So they wanted to make a bore field. So this is an area where multiple wells or bores are drilled to use for water for a particular license. So I work in the water industry, so I handle a lot of these kinds of licenses. And it's basically a bore field, so they need a lot of water to run the machinery to extract the earth minerals. That's just how these things work. And because of this environmental surveying and monitoring they did, this bore field has now been relocated. So both parties are happy. May not be the outcome that everyone wanted, but everyone gets something. The mine companies can build their mines, and which is copper and gold, and the conservationists have this huge area of land where they can look out for these birds and their welfare. So it's always going to be way more complicated than we think it is. Okay, so I've just written in the name here, and let's just quickly go into that. So it's also, so we've got the night parrot, Pezoporus occidentalis. An unusual name. I don't know what it means off the top of my head, but in doing my research, I wanted to break it down a little bit. So we have Pezos, which means foot in Greek, actually, and like porous, to walk. So ground dweller. And the occidentalis is Latin for western, so it's found in the western parts of Australia. So we've got our Pezoporus occidentalis, our ground dweller in the west of Australia. That's really all it is, just broken down. So once you get into it with the research and that, it's actually very interesting how these names come about. So it also has some cool common names, and I have never heard of these, to be honest, but they sound awesome. So we've got our midnight cockatoo, our porcupine parrot, nocturnal ground parakeet, spinifex parrot, spinifex night parrot, or night parakeet. So some interesting ones there. I'm pretty sure there are several species of parrot that can also be called spinifex parrot. It's just a common name that we associate birds that live or eat spinifex in. So it's quite interesting. It's a bit funny. Yeah, and they're obviously called the night parrot. So, well, this is what I've always known them as. I haven't really known them as any other name. Maybe spinifex night parrot or something, but I've always known them as the night parrot. And they are very closely related to the ground parrot, which, shocker, is another bird on the ground that pretty much looks exactly like this guy. So I'll put some images up on the screen of what they actually look like, but the night parrot is obviously very elusive, very hard to find, as I've talked about. They were thought extinct for many years, and the ground parrot is not common, but they are seen every now and then. And yeah, obviously nowhere near as elusive as this guy, but very similar species. I do actually want to do a video on the 4 grand parrots of the world, because there are only 4 species of parrots that primarily live their lives on the ground. They can fly, these guys, but they just don't tend to. The environment that they live in, which again is another niche filling animal. Yeah, the environment that they, the niche that they fill in that environment, they don't fly much. They just access a lot of things they need on the ground. They can fly if they need to. If say a predator scares them or something, it's they can go, they can fly. Same with the ground parrot, but yeah, I'll get into that in another video one day. So, speaking of similar species, yes, they are closely related to the ground parrot, but which is the same family, so they're very similar, but they're cousins. So, different species, found in different areas, that sort of thing. I'll go more into that into another video. But we've got the ground parrots and the night parrot in one little family over here. And then, not in the same family by any means, but in the same realm is the budgerigar. So I think I mentioned this before. We have a lot of people, I think in America, maybe the UK, call them a parakeet, and they're kept as pets in a lot of houses. They're found worldwide. You can get an English budgerigar as well, which are a bigger, plumper kind of bird. But the budgerigar I'm talking about is native to Australia, and they are primarily green and yellow with a kind of turquoisey blue kind of colour. And yeah, I'll put an image on screen. But you can see by the pattern on the back of the budgerigar, it is very similar to the night parrot and the ground parrot. So this is what I'm talking about when I mentioned camouflage. So camo is a really interesting topic. I would love to do a video on it, but there isn't a lot of information out there, shockingly. I feel like it's something that has been researched a lot in the military, in like just human clothing and stuff, but where animals are concerned, we don't know a lot of reasons for camouflage. There are so many very different types of camouflage in nature. And I do have a couple of great books, and I will get into it in another video. But for now, I just want to say it is an amazing, varied topic. There are so many different forms of camouflage, and these guys have actually one of the most common forms, which it's in budgerigars, it's in ground parrots, it's in these guys. But there's also the New Zealand kakapo, which it is another ground-dwelling parrot. It's a much bigger bird, but they have very similar colorings and markings. So here's some pictures of them on screen. Hopefully I'm putting them up right now. And they vary in different shades of green and yellow and have different patches of green and yellow, but they all have this mottled black or dark sort of barring. And it's really interesting when you talk about or think about their camouflage and how it works with the way they move and live and that sort of thing. So my best guess with this kind of camouflage is, so there are a lot of birds of different sizes and world range. So the kakapo is a bigger bird, stockier sort of bird. Budgerigars are tiny. They're one of the smallest parrots in the world. And the night parrot is medium size. So it's not about size. Which to have this greenish yellow with mottled black or dark patches or spots. This form of camouflage. So it's great if you think about it. It's great for blending into long grasses. So here we've got the grasses and they stick out a bit. there's lots of dark lines. Because Australian grasses are usually quite bushy, with a blend of greens and light yellow, like wheaty kind of colours, and combined with the red desert sand, the mottled black with green and yellow, just like in military camouflage, is aimed at disrupting or blurring the outline to better blend into the environment. So obviously this is a drawing, but this little guy here has a pretty defined outline. But in the wild, it would blend in a lot better with the spinifex, the grasses, because the lines are just a lot less pronounced. They blur into it with, I did have a sticker. Gone. It will blur into it. So I might just draw a little bit. It's black pencil. So we've got these lines around here, and spinifex is sort of in a little shape like this. It has lots of lines that splay out like this. And so these mottled black lines blend in when this little parrot is moving along the spinifex, and even just crouching down in among it, which is what they would do during the day, it blurs that outline of the animal. And same with humans who wear camo clothing, it sort of just blends in that little bit to their environment. And yeah, they're not standing out as much. Also, I want to say it would help with flight, because they are in motion, moving during flying. I believe the dark flecks just look like, a moving object in the sky, and a huge clump of budgerigars, for example, or budgies, a big group of them flying around just look like one big bird, because they all sort of blend into each other. That's just my best guess with that one. But yeah, I find it very interesting. You might not, but yeah, I just think this kind of mottled, barring kind of dark colours with the brighter greens and yellows is very interesting. And yeah, the birds in flight or open, usually arid and windy environments. So wind can have an effect on that if they're sort of crouched down in the spinifex, or they're flying around, or in a budgie's case, or a night parrot at times. I've just done this little drawing down here, just to show that the parrot hides in the spinifex, just like in the sticker. I put a few tiny little bird stickers. I thought that's cute. They're nice and secret and hiding away there. Yeah, I don't think I did too well with colours on this spread. There's just a lot going on, but that's okay. We make mistakes sometimes. Probably shouldn't have done this, and this, but I do like the greens and the blues and dark browns and that. And there's a little bit of these colours in here, I guess. So anyway, this is the finished spread of our night parrot there. I did do some journaling as well. So amazing green and yellow with mottled dark barring for camouflage. And the world's most elusive parrot, and nocturnal, hence the moon and everything. I did little bits of tape around here. A couple more, just little touches. So that's my video on the night parrot. one of the most elusive parrots in the world, and there are some elusive parrots out there. So, okay, so I got this T-shirt here. It's actually Xena Lugosi. It's a tattoo artist, and I just wanted to show you. So I love this T-shirt. And that's the back. And I love it. I wear it all the time. Hope you can see it properly. Well, I can't see. Thanks. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support, and please stay tuned for any further videos. Okay, bye.